Today I'm going to help you get ready for the meta store. And you might be here because you want to prepare, stay ahead, or you need help figuring out a VRC that maybe didn't go through or you got rejected on when submitting to the meta. Or maybe there's a game that you published and meta contacted you about failing a certain VRC after your app was already approved. Okay. So if you like these videos, like you want more information about Meta, whether it's a dashboard, in-app purchases, subscriptions, publishing to Meta, the market on Meta, what's going on, any information that you want, and just comment below. If you like these and you want more, please like the video, subscribe, and let me know what is it that you would benefit from the most. Because I want to help developers understand what's going on with Meta, help you overcome all these VRCs, all these questions that are a bit ambiguous sometimes, and the documentation is not very informative. I want to help developers succeed. And that's why I'm making these videos. Today, we're going to go over Vrc.Quest.Functional 1 through 13. The reason I picked this is because these are the ones that I've seen the most. Okay, the first tip that I'm going to share with you to help you not stress out is when you get the message from Meta, what do you do? Okay, you get a message from Meta saying that you failed a VRC, you need to fix it within a week or the game will be taken down. Okay. Usually when you're in the process of submitting to Meta, you can just communicate with them. But what happens is I'm going to move this over. And if you get a message, you'll get a red warning somewhere in here about the VRCs, and it will tell you why it failed. And here you can resubmit. You can resubmit saying that you didn't get enough. I didn't get detail on why I failed VRC functional or whatever it's called 1. And you could resubmit and they'll answer and give you the details. Now, they could be a lot clearer on the first response. They could have sent you the details on the first message, and then you could have fixed it and you could have been done. But that doesn't happen. What I've seen happen is the message seems to be automated, or someone in the Meta department is just logging and QAing games like crazy. So they're just like, okay, this failed that, and then they send it back. This one failed that, and they send it back. And they don't worry about making notes or any, I don't know. But this is how it happens right now. You'll get a vague, very small message that says, you need to fix this VRC. You have 1 week, and that's it. And so what I suggest is, if you don't know what it is, then submit for review and ask for more information. That's all. You don't have to change anything. You can re-upload the same APK with a newer version. Or you can just resubmit saying you didn't change anything, but you need help. Okay, so you can do that. Now let's talk about while you're doing that. So I suggest that's the first thing, because you'll get an answer back, and within 24 hours, you'll know exactly what you did wrong. They'll tell you. Now, if you want to prepare for some of these so that you never get the message, because they will QA your game, let's talk about it. I'm going to mention, first of all, I'm going to do the pluses in here. The plus means that it's optional. So I want to talk to you about the optionals first, because these are like good if you want to make money on Meta, okay? These are things that they know help the customer experience, the player experience, and they want you to have a good, they want you to be successful because they take 30% of whatever you make. So let's go over the plus. So in here we have the first plus is if the VRC.Quest.Functional number 7. This one's for multiplayer games, or if you need connection to the internet. Usually if you have a back end that needs to download data for the player, that usually you need internet connection to save and load data. You also need internet connection if you are in a multiplayer game. So this is a plus because you don't want to have players confused about what's going on. Maybe you have an offline mode that works without internet, and so then you can, but you got to make sure that you tell the player what's going on and that they are aware that they're not connected to the internet, because they might just not know. And so that's a better user experience. The other one, this one's huge. I totally agree with this because this was done a lot at the beginning, because of the way UIs are in like Call of Duty and all these other games where you have the screen locked to the camera. A lot of people lock the headset, even like they do the warped, and they still had a lock UI as if you were like in a helmet or something. And so, but headlocked menus and UI element are usually uncomfortable, and it's really annoying because you're looking and you're trying to look and it moves as you're looking at it, and if it's in the corner of your eye, it's like you chasing your tail, and so this is not comfortable. So don't do that. usually what happens is you have a little bit more room to breathe so you can see it, and you usually want to have it in front of the player. And if you're gonna do a little bit of movement, maybe a little bit of lag, or just do it positional, not rotational, or however you want. But make sure it's not locked on your head, because that is really hard to use. Okay. So, and then the last one, the app supports localize. So this is just for localization. If you have localization, it's just saying, hey, like this is what the player is expecting. If their language is not there, default to English. And if it is there, that is configured that it defaults to their configure. And so that you're using Meta to APIs to make sure you know what localization your user chose as a default. Okay, not because a lot of times probably what you'll do is you'll start in English regardless, and then you'll have them choose the localization. So they're just saying a plus would be to actually default it to their configure stuff, because some people that care about localization will probably have that setting set up on Meta, and that's just a plus for you because they'll see that and they realize that you went above and beyond. And usually, if you're using localization, it's because you care about the players, and so this is a no-brainer. Okay, now we're gonna get into the specifics, the required. And I'm gonna make sure that you two that you have it locked to each one so that you can skip to the specific function now. Because if you failed on VRC 1 or 2 or 3, then you'll want to go to that point. The one thing that I want to clarify is some of these are interconnected. Some when they play, they'll pause the game, they'll run around, they'll pause here, they'll pause at every point, and they might say, well, when it pauses, the app freezes. So that's two things, right? Like in here it says VRC2 is about pausing, but then the functionality is that it crashes or freezes. So they'll mark it as failing the VRC number 1. Okay, so let's go over VRC. So I wanted to make sure that you understand how these work. Sometimes they test them together, not separate, and they'll tell you where it fails, and that's what counts. Okay, so let's talk about it. VRC.Quest.Functional 1. You gotta run without crashes, freezes, or extended periods of time. Usually what happens is you test it and you're like, my game never crashes. It's been in the app for 2 years. Why now? What happens is they'll use everything. Okay, if you have a specific plugin, if you have something that records, for example, if you have a camera in the game, mic, recording, any feature that you have in your app, they will test and they will try to push the boundaries and the edge cases to make sure to see if the app crashes, freezes, or if it's not responsive after a time. They might leave the headset down, they might put it on, and they'll wait, and they'll be there just checking it. And so you have to make sure, if you don't want to get dinged for this, this is just like hard because you have to try everything. And the other thing that you have to try is the second VRC with functional is the pause menu. So pause everywhere in your game. If you're in single player, when the game pauses, I'll show you this menu, this button right here. This button right here is the menu. So that's the right stick, the menu button. When this is pressed, Unity has on application pause option that you can detect, or you can detect the button if you want. But the main thing is don't use this button for anything, okay? Do not make it another functionality. This is specifically for meta stuff. You have your left controller stick in here. This one is the hamburger button is for your settings. So you can use it however you want to do a settings pop-up and stuff. People use it. So if you want settings, personalized settings, this is the button. Don't try anything funny with the other one. Right, left, okay? So you do on application pause, and if you want to be extra careful, specifically with other VRCs and multiplayer games, on application focus, lose focus, or there's 2 Unity functionalities that pop up when these things happen. Now, sometimes those don't get caught, and so sometimes there's a OVR tools that you can use for like when the headset loses tracking, and those are more consistent. So if you can't get so sometimes what happens is if you take your headset off, the app loses focus. If you walk out your boundaries, the application loses focus. Sometimes if that is not triggering, another way to do it is to do the OVR tool and make sure to use that to make sure you're getting all the edge cases. But for the most part, when you hit pause on application pause, the game needs to pause in single player. Okay, pause. And you want to test that now. When you implement this, you want to test that with everything. This VRC is huge because I think it's the glue to all the other VRCs and to your game. Oftentimes, people don't check these VRCs until they have to publish to Meta, right? You're building everything in OpenXR, you're planning Steam, PlayStation, Pico. You want to develop for all the apps. and you're making your game, and then like a year later when you're done with your game, you're going to publish, and now you have all these issues, right? Oh, okay, now I need to pause. Okay, where's the pause button? Oh, where's the, and then you have to check to make sure it's only for Meta, not for the other apps. And my advice is to always have these in mind. That's why I'm making these videos, so you don't have to stress about it. You just, when you're making your game, think about, if it's a single player, like, you're gonna need to pause. So how are you gonna do physics, or are you keeping track of things, enemies and stuff? Because usually what happens, people pause using the time scale, and some things are not. When you set time scale to 0, you'll have things, everything will pause except for certain things. And so you got to be aware of that as you're making the game. Also, some people use a time warp, right? Like to slow down and fast forward. And so the game doesn't, so you have functions that happen regardless of the time speed, so that it doesn't get affected by the time warp. And then when you go to pause, they'll override that. And so they don't pause. And so you need a true pause for your game. So be aware of that as you're designing your game, whether it's single player or multiplayer. And my other tip, like on the side, outside of VRCs, if you want to make money make in VR, don't bother with the porting. If your game is good enough for the Meta store, you'll make money, and you can pay 1% of your earnings from Meta could pay for the porting. And so sometimes you say, oh, I'm going to save all this time. Like, the reality is, like, don't worry about anything else but Meta. Meta has a monopoly on VR. 90 to 95% of your money is going to come from Meta anyways. So if you're really into like getting bang for your buck, don't worry about OpenXR, XR, like trying to like use multiple like tools that are universal. Focus on these VRCs, because these will be the biggest headaches for you when publishing. And if you do it from the get-go, they'll save you time, energy, and you'll make money faster. That's it. So let's continue with the VRCs. We have the VRC.Quest.Functional 3. The app must not leave the user stuck at any point in the experience. So this one, very relatable to the others. The main thing they're going to do is play and go everywhere they can. They'll go in every scenario, every branch, every option, right, left, this, that. They'll make sure to try every option available. You have a Twitch streaming, and they want to make sure that you're not like, let's say you didn't calculate for like a little like wall in the corner and they fall through and you don't have a respawning. If they can glitch through things and they get stuck, they don't want that. So any place that you can get stuck, be aware of that. Or if you can fall off the map, make sure that they can reset so they're not stuck. So make sure that there's no point in the game, and that's mostly with like a map awareness of your game and what you're doing. So if you're telling a story and you're going through, make sure that there's no scenario where the player is not making a choice, or for some reason it looks like there's no way out, right? There's no options and the player can't go anywhere, and there's no exit or reset or restart, that the player doesn't feel stuck. Okay. VRC.Functional 4. The app must not lose user data. This is pretty straightforward. If you uninstall the game, it will like lose the local player pref stuff, and that's okay. But the main thing is, if you're tracking specific things with the player, make sure you just have to not lose that data, that they have access that is tied. Usually what I like to do is I tie it to their user ID, so that way when they no matter which headset they log in, they can have their data. Or you have a unique identification or a new login like email and password. But usually I just use their ID because that's unique. I've tried using headset device, but I noticed some VR devices have the same SKU. Like there's no like I do because the chips are exactly the same, and so they're fabricated. Like there's no, some headsets have the same one. If you do the unique device identifier, so they're not unique on the headset. But just let you know, the main thing, if you want a unique, just use their player user ID. That's unique to their user. And this goes into some of the other ones that we're gonna go over later. But just be aware of that. VRC.Quest.Functional 5. The application must respond to the headset positional tracking as well as orientation. So this one's just, if you're building Unity, Unreal, and you have the VR tracking, usually this is fine. Sometimes if the game gets stuck and it freezes, it'll be another VRC. But this one, usually by default, you're pretty good as long as you don't do anything crazy. If you are doing crazy things like scaling, moving the player from first view to third view, or like if you're watching something, or you're doing like a trailer for your game or a movie thing that you're displaying for the game, and then you have the player in VR, so like they're switching between rigs, make sure that they don't get stuck, and it's always tracking the headset. App must only include MetaQuest headsets and controllers within the title store assets. So this one is, I mentioned it before, but basically your headset they want to see the original. Like I know we got dinged for Monkey Do because we had stickers on them. So even if they're the headset and you have stickers on them, make sure you're not using it for trailers. So if you're shooting a trailer, images with players playing your game, usually you're doing like a mixed reality, or you're doing some going back and forth between someone using the headset and someone in the game. You want to make sure no stickers, make sure it's good, that it looks like the original headset, no modifications. Probably if you have like some of this stuff, I would like you have some covers for your game and stuff. I mean, for your headset, you want to probably take those off just to be on the safe side. The other thing is if you're shooting a trailer, you want to make sure that they're using these wrist. Meta wants it. We had someone that we shot a trailer and they noticed that they weren't using the strap, and we had to do a post process or after the fact, like on post, to do it so that it looked like they had the strap on. Well, again, super tedious, but these are things that you can that now you know. And when you shoot your trailer, you know to make sure no stickers on your headset, no modifications, and make sure that you have these on the person shooting the game. Okay. The last two, this one's VRC.Quest.Functional 9. In experiences using local tracking space, the user must be able to reset their forward orientation. So this is when you are actually in need of the boundaries, whether it's in Quest 2 with the regular boundaries or Quest 3 with mixed reality positioning. Like if you have things that are tracking the location and you're aware of that, when the player they hold this button, again, this is meta, so just leave it for meta. But when you hold this, you have a little ring and then it resets your orientation on meta. So if you're using local space, all your boundaries, and you're doing something with that in your game, you need to make sure that everything realigns, because that means the player is wanting to reset their forward orientation. And that happens a lot with Unreal and with teleporting, because usually you're teleporting and back in the day you would teleport, and you could only teleport within your local space, so that the way like the space will move around as you teleport. So this is huge when you're teleporting. That feature is not used a lot now, but if you're teleporting, you need the local space boundary because you're going to shift it so that you know where the player is moving all the time. And so in that case, you need to make sure that when they reset, you also reset the orientation. And in mixed reality now, with the latest SDKs, they do have where you can reset without messing up your anchors, which was a huge deal. The last VRC we're going to talk about is the functional number 12. Apps must run correctly and with full functionality for multiple entitled users on the headset. So Meta has multiple users that can use the same headset, and they have different archetypes of how those users. You can have two separated users or users under the other users. So like you have different hierarchies. The easiest way I've done this is to just you can have multiple save files and they can choose. What I've liked to do is, again, if you tie things to their user ID, it makes things so much easier because you're storing the data and attaching it to the user. And so if the user deletes and creates a new user, they have a new game, and that's okay. If they want their game on that user, whether it's like the parent or the kid or whatever hierarchy it is, it'll always be tied to that player, regardless of how the entitled user is accessing the headset. Okay, if it's a Quest 2, a Quest 3, or through their friend or underneath, like if the parent changed the hierarchy, if it's less trouble. Okay, you don't have to do anything new. Again, the way to do it is to use a user ID. It's tied to that user, regardless of what device, where it is. Okay, and with that, that's all the VRCs. I know there's more. I will do more on those specific, but these are the big ones that always come up because they have to do with playing the game. And it's hard to QA and find all these bugs. That's why when Meta comes back to you with these, you know what's going on and how to go about them.